So here's what we do here. I read the paper, we discuss the paper, and at the end we get to review the paper, and then the paper will go up on a website. The review will go up on the website, which I am working on at the moment, that looks like this. So this is Philosophy Roulette 502. You can see below it's 540 at the moment. And so like this is this paper. We got the link, got the abstract, and then the video review right here. And then we use emotes to review the paper. So everyone in chat gets to review the paper using custom emotes. They're Better TTV emotes. So they look like this. And so if you can't see them, well, you need to install Better TTV. But I record your rating using those emotes, or the string basically. And that will actually, so then you'll be able to see how everyone in chat felt about the paper. So, but anyway, this is Reconciling Open-Mindedness and Belief in, where are we? We are in Theory and Research in Education, and this is a philosopher out of, well, it only works when the review screen is up, so you cannot just, review now. You have to only review when I say to review, and that'll be at the end. Okay, so this is, here we go, and as always, ask me questions along the way. It's my first time reading it too. It was suggested to me because this is a friend of my friend's, and here we go. A man who is free from mistakes can pretend to no praises except from the justness of his understanding. But a man who corrects his mistakes shows at once the justness of his understanding and the candor and ingenuity of his temper. And that's a Hume quote, apparently. Open-mindedness is manifestly of value for any education that aims to equip students to pursue inquiry, to be self-critical, and to learn from experience. Open-mindedness is also a central political value for a liberal democratic educational system. A liberal democratic educational system will emphasize and promote its culture and its values for the sake of developing good citizens. However, the liberal state is supposed to be neutral with regard to substantive conceptions of the good life, since promotion by the state of some conception of the good diminishes the liberty to pursue other conceptions of the good. To teach for open-mindedness is to provide students with access to a plurality of values and the skills for critically evaluating both those values and their own. Conceived in this way, cultural educational inculcation need not count as a restriction on students' opportunities or freedom of thought. Yeah, so I guess there's like a sort of a paradox there. If you want to inculcate freedom, that may actually restrict what other viewpoints there are in the world, ones that don't, do freedom. So yeah, you turned on the Better TV and you want to see if it worked? It's fine. Yeah. Still, many are concerned that open-mindedness is itself a substantial value in conflict with preservation of certain traditional values, including parental... Oh, wait, was that a quote? What's this? Oh, it's a footnote. Okay. Including parental... Oh, wait, is there... Yeah. Some of the pages are out of order. She warned me about this. Parental and religious authority. In this paper, I address a crucial instance of this broad worry. How can one be open-minded about a strongly held belief, and why should one? Okay, yeah, so why would you want to lose your very important beliefs? The evident tension represented in this question is that if one strongly believes a proposition, then one regards it as not seriously possible that it is wrong. I will use the word tension to refer to a prima facie conflict or incompatibility. If so, it seems pointless to submit to the typical demands of open-mindedness, to be responsive to the criticism of one's belief and to the fair consideration of rivals. Either one is persuaded by the doubts of others, in which case one goes wrong, or as a consequence of what one believes, one comes to believe that one will never be persuaded otherwise, and so why bother listen? So, this is me and evolution. I worked my ass off to understand the theory of evolution by, Darwinian evolution. People have, I used to talk about it more. I had anti-evolutionist people complain to me that I wasn't looking at what they said. I don't give a fuck what they said. What they would point me to would be the weakest, shittiest fucking theory I've ever seen. And I was just like, no, I don't care about your theory. I'm not even going to look at this point because I know everything that gets said over there. And so why would I give a fuck about your shitty ass evolutionary theory? It took me a long time and a lot of work to understand evolution. And then I have my own views on it. And it's fuck you, fuck off. Why would I even bother listen to them? And it's I get this. I'm in this camp for some of my beliefs. I am not going to be persuaded. I'm just not. on, like, for most things. If you show me you know what you're talking about, I'll listen, but otherwise, fuck off. Like, seriously. Okay, this tension was central to a recent unsatisfactory exchange concerning open-mindedness and education. After allowing for open-mindedness in cases where one has no settled opinion, I says different. You have no settled opinion, no settled opinion. But denying the appropriateness of open-mindedness about a strongly held belief, like wrongness of child abuse, Peter Gardner asks us to consider a teacher who affirms, quote, I am open-minded about whether racism is evil, but I believe it is. End quote. He holds that this affirmation is contradictory. William Hare, the main target of Gardner's critique, takes open-mindedness to require, quote, that we regard our own positions as subject to revision in the light of critical reflection. The test of open-mindedness is whether or not we are prepared to entertain doubts about our views. End quote. All right, so will you say, look, I think racism is okay, because you're open-minded about this. You're willing to consider whether racism is okay. And then other people is like, no, you're not. It's like, nah. And it's like, so that you can believe that racism is evil and then you consider whether it isn't. It's like you think that's contradictory, or you think, well, you might have to like revise your opinions. Okay. Similarly, Hare and McLaughlin, in their response to Gardner, hold that open-mindedness requires the admission of the possibility that one is mistaken and correlatively that a position inconsistent with one's own might turn out to be true. Yeah. Gardner appears to be rightly objecting that open-mindedness toward a specific belief is not compatible with holding that belief. Yet, details aside, Hare and McLaughlin also seem right to maintain that open-mindedness is a justified ideal for education, even with regard to the strongly held beliefs referred to by Gardner. Consequently, any answer to our original conceptual problem, as illustrated by this exchange, must be a reconciliatory one. It must make sense of a belief open-mindedness tension while denying an ultimate incompatibility. Many people have like really hardcore beliefs and then they change later in life. It happens. So you can't say it doesn't happen. Now, the question is, can you admit that it happens, even possibly to you? And like I said, I'm not going to admit to like some things about my theories changing. I just don't think that that's going to happen. Now, putting my like eggs, eggs in the basket, eggs on the table, whatever this thing is. It's like, it'd have to be willing to change, but not like a direct assault might not be the right way to go about it. For instance, if you say, well, I think you're wrong about evolution, I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about mostly. Like, you have to put a lot of time and effort to show me you know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, show me. Now, if you show me you know what you're talking about, then I will look at your specific arguments. But I don't think my ideas are going to change. But given enough arguments, then I'd be like, well, those are very good arguments about certain things I thought about. But like the direct attack's never going to work for me, I don't think. Cards on the table. Yeah, stream of brain. I start losing words, memory, names. It's all going to go. Like, it's all going to go very quickly, sadly. I'm not very far into this paper, and there's a long way to go. Okay, the root of the impasse lies, I think, in an assumption that Gardner shares with Hare and McLaughlin. The assumption explains the unsatisfactory nature of the exchange, its failure both to reach resolution and to even appear to be resolvable. The shared assumption, which I reject, is that, quote, okay. Oh yeah, I have to go back a page. Sorry. The shared reconciliation is, quote, the import of open-mindedness in regard to a belief can only reside in one's degree, that is, strength of belief towards the proposition believed, so that to be open-minded about a belief is to have a lower than full assurance of the proposition's truth. Okay, so they're taking a graded belief in the proposition. So you have full belief, but then if you have a less than full belief, then you're being open-minded to the degree that it's not a full belief. Rejection of this assumption follows from the reconciliation proposed below. I introduced the reconciliation by trying to make sense of the tension and by rejecting an easy way out suggested by Hare and McLaughlin, upon which implausibly the tension dissolves. The tension partly resides in an intuitive sense that strong belief rules out acknowledgement that one may be wrong, but there is a narrower basis for the felt tension. The heard contradiction in Gardner's example, quote, I am open-minded about whether racism is evil, but I believe it is, depends on its parallel with Moore's paradox. Moore's paradox is the assertion of the following form, or heard as contradictory. P, but I do not believe that P. For example, it's raining, but I do not believe that it's raining. Yeah, and this is actually something I've worked on. That's in my, from on certainty. That book right there that I was talking about earlier with DCI, that is Wittgenstein talking about Moore's paradox a lot and things like in that nature. And he talks about like Moore's proof of the external world, these things. Okay, however, the whole proposition itself is not contradictory. It could be raining, and I do not believe it. Moore's paradox, though a paradox of assertion, represents a contradiction in thought. I cannot think that it is raining, but that I do not believe it. For to think that it is raining is to recognize myself as believing it, while by the second clause I deny that I do believe it. Since I do not accept that open-mindedness about belief must bear on the strength with which it is held, the reconciliation to be proposed does not invite a Moore's paradox formulation. Okay, so they're saying, look, you're not doing full assertion here. You're doing graded assertion. You're saying, well, I kind of think about this. And it's not that it is raining. It's kind of like, I kind of believe it's raining. And so if you kind of believe it's raining, but it is, well, that's fine. Your belief is sort of hazy. That's okay. Okay. Another way to avoid Moore's paradox problem and to resolve the issue is suggested by Hare and McLaughlin's response: to treat belief as a weaker attitude than required by Gardner. If I am only pretty sure that racism is evil, then of course I can take it to be seriously possible that it is not. However, this is a poor way to respond, most obviously because it concedes the incompatibility that ought to be questioned. The response also fails to fit the facts. Few of our beliefs are held as a degree of belief, since among other reasons, it would introduce too much complexity for coherent thought. Moreover, only beliefs held as full or all or nothing beliefs can represent how we actually do hold most strong opinions. Yeah, so most of the time we fully believe stuff. The idea that we don't fully believe stuff is usually kind of weird. Sometimes you're like, well, you think it's a 50% chance of raining, but you have like a full belief that it's like you don't know. And so you're saying, well, there's two possibilities, but I don't know them, but you're very sure about the different way the world might be. Okay. Moreover, only beliefs held as full or all or nothing beliefs can represent how we actually do hold most strong opinions. Only if you all out believe that racism is evil are you committed to that position. If you hold it merely as some high degree of belief, you are of course open-minded about it, for your very position is to be poised to alteration. To be so poised is to lack commitment. The litmus test for open-mindedness is not the case where inquiry is open, but those where one accepts as a true hypothesis, that is, come to all out believe it, and so regard inquiry as settled. It is only with full beliefs that you then confront the genuine problem of how you can both maintain your commitment and have an open mind about it. Yeah, so this is the problem. How do you be like, racism is evil, 100%, but then you also be like, well, I like to be open-minded about stuff. And if you're only open-minded about stuff that you think is unimportant, then you're not really that open-minded, are you? So here we go. Author says, the heart of the reconciliation that I propose divides into the following claims and consequences. 1. The primary or inherent value of open-mindedness is to our interest in the truth of our beliefs or to the growth of knowledge, the connection between the two being dependent upon an appreciation of our fallibility. 2. Doesn't racism is evil 99.9% reconcile it? Well, that's not what the author is saying here. And they're saying, look, you want it to be like, look, there's no chance of it being wrong. Now, if I know we've got Bayesians in chat, and so you'd say, well, if it's wrong to the 99.99999% chance it's being wrong, the amount of work it would take to undo that is unreasonable. So, yeah. Like, then you're saying, okay, but that's one way to slice it. But that's not what the author is saying here. Frank says, confident enough that I shouldn't worry about correcting unless something really interesting happens. Yeah, I mean, that's one way of saying it, that you have such a strong confidence that doesn't matter. But then you get your problem, like they were saying here, where like you're only pretty sure. Like this is what he says. If I'm only pretty sure that racism is evil, then of course I can take it to be seriously possible it's not. And so that's what the 99.999 says, is that there's still a chance it's not. So here's the question then. They say, don't you want to be able to say that racism is evil full stop? If you don't care about making that claim, then I guess that's good enough for you. But then you're not really saying racism is evil. You're not. You're saying racism is very most probably evil. Now, if you're just going to treat this as a way of speaking that once something gets enough like decimal points past the 0 with 9s, then it's okay to say that. Well, okay. But like most people want to be, yeah, I figured you would be. But most people are saying all or nothing. And so it's either all or nothing. Held as full or not. Yeah. They're saying, okay, to be so poised is to lack commitment. So if you, Frank and all the other Bayesians I know are around, do you think you lack commitment? You're going to say, well, I lack commitment to the 0.0000001, and you're okay with that. But yeah. You think everyone who thinks they're certain about things are just full of shit? Well, I raise my hand then. They have incorrect beliefs in their beliefs. Yeah. Well, I mean, congratulations. You are, well, to what percentage are you certain about that, Frank? You think everyone who's certain about things are just full of shit. Well, you are only certain of that. They're only full of certain. They're only full of shit to the 99.99999%, and that 0.00001 not full of shit. So there you go. You don't need 6 zeros. I don't know if there's anything more than. All right, so well that's 3 zeros then. Okay, you only need 3 zeros. So I'm only full of shit to the 1,000th degree or whatever. Yeah, or what? However many. Pick however many there are then. So it's like, yeah, but again, you seem very certain in your Bayesian account, which is fine. And I guess you'd have to say that the Bayesian account where you're doing this probability has to be more certain than all the other beliefs, because that's what's guaranteeing all the other ones. Because if you were less certain about Bayesianism and this sort of probabilistic scheme than the other ones, then you'd have to say that the Bayesianism was less certain than anything else. So the Bayesianism must be a little bit more certain. So that one must need like 7 zeros or whatever. But that's okay. So, but again, weird things start going on at that point. Yeah. But okay, that's fine. For the Bayesianisms, I guess this paper just isn't for you. But again, the non-Bayesian people might say, well, you lack commitment, and you're saying racism isn't evil, even if only to a little percentage. But then they'd say you're full of shit because you're just denying the truth. No. Well, you are criticizing. You're not criticizing me. You're criticizing this author, which is fine. I mean, and you're criticizing people who think having full belief is the right way to go. That's okay. You can have your philosophical position. That's not a problem. So it's like, yeah. You're just saying your answer is better. Well, that's like saying no offense, but you're just fucking wrong. My answer is better. And that's okay. This is philosophy. You are allowed to have positions here. Like, that's cool. Like, go right ahead and have your position. Like, other people will disagree, though. Okay. Since the dominant beliefs to which fallibility applies are full or all or nothing beliefs, yeah, and not all philosophy, before I continue, not all philosophy is for everybody. So like this paper, you might say, not for me. It's like, I don't believe what they say, and so their arguments do not apply to me. And that's fine too. It's like, yeah, that happens to me all the time. Quite often I read papers on stream that I don't give a shit about because, like, say they're about Immanuel Kant's ethics. I am not a deontologist, and if you're doing deontology, have at it. I hope you have a great theory, but like it has nothing to do with me. A real philosopher, well, everyone should agree with Globus. That's true. I guess your definition of racism is different. Well, the statement in question here was racism is evil. Do you agree? How much do you agree that racism is evil? And if you have a different definition of racism, that's fine too. If it's not evil for you, it's something else. That's okay. But like, you can pick whatever your definition of racism being bad is, and then what is the degree of belief that is that you're holding it for Reserte. So it's like, yeah. It's like if you think it's okay in certain things, maybe you guys just have a semantic disagreement. Go pick something that is evil, and then you just substitute whenever they say racism is evil here, like in this, you just substitute whatever you also think is like absolutely certain. That's all. Because it's something that you have full belief in, that you are also consider, should you be open-minded about that? Okie doke. Since the dominant beliefs to which fallibility applies are full or all or nothing beliefs rather than degrees of belief, I'm pretty sure that P, there is no latitude for open-mindedness about any particular belief where this is both to fully believe it and to regard its falsity as seriously possible. You're saying that affirmative action might be considered racism. Okay. well, that's fine. That's like a particular problem here in the U.S. With like some sort of racism against, the people that are not in the affirmative action, like selection. That's fine. But racism is evil then. But then, well, no. You could still say that racism is evil, but you're counting affirmative action as kind of racism, and then it would be evil. So you would actually agree that racism is evil, but you disagree that affirmative action counts as racism with people that don't agree with that. So yeah. But like again, you would agree that racism is evil, but then you might disagree about which policies are racist. Frank says in a different context it could be but as strategy to ameliorate existing racism, is really weird to call it that. Yeah. So again, but we're not worried about particular policies here. We're worried about something that we're just agreeing across the board is evil. So whatever it is, like you could be like child molestation is evil or whatever. You could be like, like you might think that like murdering innocent people is evil. And then like whatever it is, you pick one of those. But then, of course, you can say, well, sometimes killing isn't bad. Like, you go to war to protect your country, and, like, that's okay. And it's like, sure, you got just war theory, but then you're defining it differently. It's like, well, okay, that's not murder anymore. That's, like, defending your homeland, and that one's okay. That's fine. And then that would be a particular policy that we're saying is not murder. We're calling it something different. And that's what was happening with the affirmative action. Generally, we say racism is generally bad or evil or whatever. Okay, so 3. Yet open-mindedness is defensible in accord with its primary value, 1 above. And that's in accord with open-mindedness is good, yeah, because you want to learn stuff. Because only with open-mindedness is a believer in a position to optimally revise his beliefs with new information. Since we care that our beliefs are true and we recognize that some of them are not, we accept fallibilism, we care to be open to revising our beliefs in ways that eliminate falsehoods and in ways that improve or increase our knowledge. Open-mindedness is then a second order or meta attitude towards one's beliefs and as believed, and not just towards a specific proposition believed, just as fallibilism is a second order doubt about the perfection of one's believing, not a doubt about the truth of any specific belief. So even though there is incompatibility between believing P and regarding P as possibly false, there is no incompatibility between believing P and regarding it qua a proposition one believes as possibly mistaken. The possibility that I or the method I employ has erred in coming to believe that P is not the possibility that the proposition believed is false, given my grounds for it. Okay, so they're doing a meta thing. They're saying, look, I could be wrong about it, but any specific one I'm not wrong about. So this is kind of a paradox of the preface for anyone who knows that. You're saying, look, I'm sure there's mistakes in the book. I don't know where they are. Every sentence looks right on its own, but there's probably a contradiction in the book. And of course, if there is no contradiction in the book, then the preface is wrong. And if there is a contradiction in the book, then the preface is right, but none of the sentences look wrong either. So it's like, what are you going to do? But like that's what it looks like is going on here. None of your individual beliefs are false, but you have a meta belief that like overall something's wrong. All right, so statements 2 and 3 yield the manifest tension between belief and open-mindedness. If I fully believe that Maureen is in Michigan, then I cannot also think that it is seriously possible that she is not. I cannot affirm or assert, quote, Maureen is in Michigan, but it's possible that she isn't. Yeah, and this is very Moore's paradoxy, is why they had to talk about it earlier. Open-mindedness need not have this implication. Claim 1 holds that the value of open-mindedness is primarily to our interest that our beliefs are true, which is the aim of intellectual or empirical inquiry. As Peirce and others have emphasized, inquiry at its best, science being the paradigm, is self-correcting. A hypothesis accepted as true at one time can be refuted subsequently through its role in guiding ongoing inquiry. In this way, our corpus of beliefs expands, and as it does so, it eliminates many false beliefs. This self-correcting mechanism requires that inquirers are open-minded enough to allow contrary discoveries or observations to count as criticisms or refutations. Okay, so this is even getting more interesting. So not only are they saying, look, you can hold your beliefs as true, but then you're going to have contradictory beliefs also held as true. So you're going to have like, this is basically, oh man, this is like going dialethist, not expecting this, where you're going to have like, okay, I believe this as 100%, but then I have other things I also hold as 1%. And so at the meta level, I've got problems. But at the object level, when we're talking about the way we think the world is, that means where it's just sort of, we're allowed to believe all this stuff, which is interesting. All right. When one keeps an open mind, one places oneself in a position to discover that some of one's beliefs are mistaken. Such an open mind also affords opportunities to discover new truths and to understand the conflicting beliefs of others. Along these lines, Mill observed that by confronting opposed views, even those holding a correct view are compelled to deepen their understanding of it. Our reconciliation and resolution of the conceptual problem is this: even though from my point of view, if I believe P, there is no serious chance that it is mistaken, I do recognize myself as generally fallible. Okay, I want to see something. This is the second colon in the same sentence. So this person had one sentence, colon, and then did something, and there's the second colon. Motherfucker, don't do this when you're writing. All right, some of my beliefs are going to be false. I even know various areas in which I am more likely to err. A natural but controversial suggestion attributed to Plato's Euthyphro is that our beliefs are more vulnerable in areas of value or opinion rather than fact or proof. The fallibility, I can admit, is not really attached to any specific belief, first order, but rather concerns my beliefs or ways of believing overall, a second order or meta beliefs, yeah. It is to view my beliefs as what I believe rather than just the proposition believed. From this viewpoint, I know that I cannot in any systematic way ferret out mistaken beliefs individually, for since each one is fully believed, I cannot recognize any consideration as reason to doubt a belief without thereby surrendering it. 1-3-4 multi-handed ratio? Yeah, something's going on here. I don't know. All right, to clarify the resolution by reference to Moore's paradox, observe that there is nothing contradictory about the following affirmation. Quote, Marine is in Michigan, but this belief is among a set of my beliefs, some members of which are likely to be mistaken, and so I should keep an open mind about them. Yeah. So this is allowing for things you believe to be true, but then also be contradictory. It's a little weird though, because generally people like to think they're coherent. That's not always the case. You could probably assume that you know things that would be in conflict with each other if you ever thought about both of them at the same time. And this happens. You think, oh wait, I was believing this, and then I realized I also believe that, and it doesn't quite make sense. Okay. Author says this is contrived, but it is not inconsistent as thought or assertion. Admittedly, the example of Marines in Michigan is atypical of the kind of proposition over which open-mindedness is a thriving issue. For just this reason of its simplicity, it yields the pertinent tension at its sharpest. What epistemic value can be found in being open-minded towards it? Since the example poses the strongest challenge, if our reconciliation works with so non-controversial an example, the standard one's opinion-disputed claims will be easier to swallow as succumbing to our reconciliation. In particular, we can apply the reconciliation to Gardner's favored case. There is no inconsistency in the teacher affirming, quote, for the following reasons, which I have conveyed to my students, racism is evil. There is no real possibility that racism is not evil, so the students should believe it without qualification. Nevertheless, they should also appreciate their fallibility, particularly in forefront matters of value and personal commitments, and so should appreciate the need for a willingness to engage in activities and adopt attitudes likely to expose and remove errors. There is no inherent conflict, though, because the full belief that racism is evil is compatible with the belief as a member of a set of beliefs, some of which are likely erroneous or requiring modification. End quote. The reconciliation can be clarified through a simple illustration, an assembly line to process widgets. The company imposes extremely high standards so that each widget comes through the manufacturing process is of the highest quality. So as a product of the process, each widget is certified non-defective. This is the analog of strong or all-out belief that each widget has no defect. Nevertheless, is indicated by the returns of a few upset customers. Some widgets get through with slight defects and imperfections. As good as the process is, it is not infallible. Note that this is a judgment about the process, not a second-order judgment. As a consequence, the company institutes a policy whereby a post-process monitor carefully examines one out of every batch of 10 widgets. A policy is uniform treatment of a range of cases whose application to a particular case widget does not depend upon prior determination that this case deserves the treatment. Yeah, so it's just a random selection. Accordingly, assume that widget 30 is selected out. The following two judgments of the monitor are in tension, though we now recognize that there is no actual conflict or incompatibility. All right, so we got quote 1, this widget has no defects or imperfections, and 2, I should carefully examine widget 30 for defects or imperfections. Their compatibility becomes manifest once we state explicitly the actual basis for the examination. Quote, the process by which my company manufactures widgets is a reliable one, and so each widget is justifiably certified as error-free. Nevertheless, probably some few that we judge as lacking in defects or imperfections by our manufacturing process do or will suffer imperfections which we care to correct. So we adopt a policy to randomly check 1 out of every 10 widgets, and it so happens that widget 30 falls under this policy. End quote. Since the company's fallibilism is about the process of manufacturing, not about any specific widget, recognition of that fallibility need not diminish assuredness about any widget. This is a little bit weird, though. You know, wouldn't you say that, look, these have, however many break randomly over the course of time. So like 1 out of every 1,000, let's say, is just bad, or 1 out of every 100,000. You could also say that every widget has a 1 in 100,000 chance of being defective. And you're not saying the manufacturing process, you're saying the object. So this is shifting the burden onto the manufacturing process away from the object. Now, this is an ontological shift of what is actually breaking. Is it the manufacturing process or is it the object? You're assuming here that all the objects are perfect. I think that's a little bit weird. Although they're saying, look, the manufacturing process isn't perfect, although all the objects coming out of it ought to be. That's strange. I think that's a little bit weird. I mean, it's the same thing as like buying a lottery ticket. This is a lottery fallacy. I mean, that's exactly what this is. I was talking about fallacies earlier. We're getting ourselves into a lottery situation. Now, of course, any lottery ticket you buy in like a big lottery, like 1 in like 100 million, is going to be likely a losing ticket. But of course, one of the tickets eventually will have to win. So even though every ticket has a vanishingly small amount of chance to win, you can't discount the chance that you need to be in it to win it, as the slogan goes. So even though it's very small, you still need to be there because one of them will win. All right. Let's see how the computer's doing. Computer looks okay. I've got no dropped frames. It's amazing. Anyway, the widget example does well illustrate how to understand fallibility conceptually if it exposes a misunderstanding of fallibilism central to the influential arguments of Mill. He reasoned from fallibilism as a doctrine that any of our judgments are likely to error, to diminish empirical support or certainty in regard to a particular judgment. However, this appeal to fallibilism, even if based on a misunderstanding of a second order for a first order doctrine, provided Mill with a crucial premise in his famed defense of tolerance, of liberty of speech and thought. If we reject the epistemological basis for Mill's tolerance argument, how is toleration to be defended? Yeah, and so basically this author is insisting that we only do the second order thing. It's only at the order of looking down on all this stuff. All the individual objects are good, but the overall picture is bad. So this is a little bit of a paradoxical situation, but okay, but they're saying, look, we're only looking at it from the second order here. Author says, within our reconciliation, tolerance can still be justified. The problem of how one can be tolerant toward opposed views without lessening one's strength of commitment parallels, of course, the open-mindedness belief problem, and so invites our reconciliation. Let us say that I hold strongly that the USA should pressure Israel to accept a Palestinian state. Temporal, see how long this problem is. This paper is from 2004. 2004, and you see how great this we've done in the Middle East. And you hold the opposite. So I regard your view not just wrong, but dangerous. This judgment seems to generate something like our familiar tension if it requires that to argue with someone implies according some minimal credence to his or her position and correlatively a lesser strength of belief towards one's own. Yet I hold both that your view should be tolerated, not suppressed or censored, despite its definite falsity, and that I may learn from arguing with you over it. I can do so only if extending tolerance to you does not thereby diminish the strength of my attitude toward my own belief. Yeah, this is one of the things I hate. Just because someone disagrees with you does not mean I should change how I feel about the world. Like, just because someone smart disagrees with me does not mean I should change how I should feel about the world. They have to provide me with some real reason. Just because they're smart doesn't mean they didn't fuck up, you know? And I hate when people be like, well, they're smart. Doesn't that mean you should reconsider my views? Fuck, hell, no. Not in a million years unless they provide me with a good reason. Just because a smart person disagrees with me, smart people fuck up too. So it's like, I have no reason to, just because people disagree with me, change my mind. Okay, but this also means, and the author is making the good point right here, if you're going to have a disagreement about stuff, you want to come with full force. If you start like hedging your bets as soon as you start arguing with someone that disagrees with you, there is no real reason. Like, it's going to make for a less good debate. You want to have the starkest disagreements to have the strongest debate and to deepen your own views and their views and to see how it falls out. Okay. In order to argue with others, it is sometimes claimed or assumed that one must be receptive to their criticisms and their alternative. Thus, it is inferred one must regard those alternatives as at least initially credible or as having a serious chance of turning out correct. To adopt either of these attitudes forces withdrawal from full or strong belief and assuredness that one is correct, since one admits the possibility that a conflicting view is correct. Such a withdrawal would undermine the force of having convincing arguments, and it does not ring true. You cannot believe something less assuredly true merely because you are willing to allow it to be challenged. Natty science, smart people can also act in bad faith like anyone else. Yes, and that's another thing. Just because they're smart doesn't mean they're good people, and they may be making very shitty arguments, acting in bad faith, or for very shitty reasons. Like, there's a lot of smart people who are racist fucks, and they try to be very convincingly say intelligent things to support their racism. And it's like, unless you know what you're doing in your debate, you may be like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And this happens all the time. And it's like, smart people can be terrible people. Like, going back to the Nazis. Nazis had a lot of scientists, a lot of smart people running the Nazi party. That's why they were so powerful. They got a lot of like military power and other things. They were able to do a lot of stuff, not because they were dumb. They were terrible people, but they were highly intelligent. And so just because you're intelligent doesn't make you a good person. And you can have shitty fucking arguments as an intelligent person. And this is, the same now as it was then. I'm not saying anyone now is a Nazi. They might be. But, they're not actually a Nazi from Germany. They might be some neo-Nazi. But, of course, smart people can make very shitty arguments. And you see this with, like, some of the, like, politicians. Some of them are very dumb. Some of them are not so dumb, but they're doing very terrible things. And you're like, that person's terrible. And I disagree with them on many topics. I think they're a terrible person, but they're really good at what they do. They're very powerful and capable. And so there's lots of problems here. It's like, well, who is saying that? Like, I disagree with most of what Mitch McConnell does, but if anyone says Mitch McConnell is stupid, they are wrong. Mitch McConnell is one of the most powerful people in the United States of America and is very competent. He knows how the U.S. government works. He knows how to do lots of stuff. And I think he does a lot of terrible things, but no one should be calling Mitch McConnell stupid. Like, that's the wrong way of going about it. And it sort of denies the skill he's had, like, politically over the years. So it'd be a weird thing to just call him stupid. Yeah, most politicians are smart. They're just shit people. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I was even saying today at work, my record is clean enough. I could actually run for office. And it's like, I don't want to run for office, but it's so depressing when you see these idiots in power and you're just like, they're obviously paid off. They obviously don't give a fuck. And they're just like, they're jackass. Yeah. Some of them are more on nowadays too, though. Yeah. I don't know if it's any worse than before, but we're definitely exposing them more with, current media. So we definitely have just complete idiots. I mean, you got to think like monarchies where it was just like somebody had to have a dumb fucking kid. And like, the kid just was an idiot in power, and the monarchy just like went on for however long because the system kept that kid propped up. But still, 8 May 1940 victory in Europe Day. Yeah, yep. So it's like, but like no one, I don't know anyone in like history that's like super happy with their government. I mean, the people in power are happy, but like everyone else, like regular people like you, me, like person working in the shop on the corner, whatever, how happy are they with their government? It's like, So, okay. In obvious ways, the reconciliation proposed above carries over. I have reason to engage in critical discussion with you as an expression of my open-mindedness in regard to a belief of mine. Since the open-mindedness is justified by my belief of myself as fallible, it does not follow from my judging it worthwhile to engage in the exchange that I do not know or should not be certain of my belief, and so too that yours is erroneous. Tolerance for your position is a political, not epistemic judgment of equality, community, and liberty. Yeah, so basically you're being political by saying, I will listen to your beliefs. You're not saying that I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I'm being, diplomatic. That's what this argument is. You have to be diplomatic. You have to be diplomatic, not epistemic. So like it's not epistemic, political. So that's what you're doing. They're arguing for diplomacy, which is kind of funny. We have concentrated on how possible conceptual problem of open-mindedness at the expense of how-to issues, particularly in regard to education. Obviously, the latter topic goes well beyond the confines of this paper, and some of it has been addressed elsewhere by others. However, we will briefly treat of how-to issues that are closely tied to our reconciliation of the conceptual problem. Like the widget manufacturers, we cannot be open-minded in regard to all our beliefs. Quote, we should be open-minded, but not so open that our brains fall out. Yeah. It would be a colossal waste of time, even if it were feasible. Indiscriminate open-mindedness is harmful to belief's aim of truth. Yeah, so if you want to aim at truth, you have to hold something steady. This is one of the big points in Uncertainty, actually. This book, this is what actually turns into hinge epistemology, which is trying to say this. You can't get rid of all your beliefs. You need some basis to like look at the world. Otherwise, you can't do anything. Like you have no basis to say this is right or wrong. You need to hold certain things true, and then you can make judgments about other things. So having full open-mindedness, your brain falls out. That's just bonkers. Okay. It would assign no more risk to such vulnerable beliefs as that capital punishment is permissible as it does to such practically invulnerable ones as that there are dogs. Yeah, so if you're like denying there are dogs, like how are we supposed to talk to you if you deny the existence of like dogs, if you deny the existence of hands? But like you can discuss capital punishment because that's something we don't know. But yeah. All right, to be so widely open-minded would be to give the appearance of our open-mindedness while rendering it ineffective. In fact, given the vastness of our beliefs, open-mindedness will serve its primary purpose only if we are highly selective about what to be open-minded about. The widget manufacturer has it easy. He or she only has to select out some number of widgets among a finite stock, but our beliefs, explicit and immediately implied, are not only infinite, but huge and myriad in overlapping categories. Okay, and so like I was saying, the hinge epistemologists that make a lot of hay on this, that only really showed up in the 90s and early 2000s. This paper is from 2004, so like this whole bit right here, they could have been like, and hinge epistemologists say this sort of stuff, like right over here. But granted, this is a paper from 2004, and so it may not have had the notoriety it does have now. So it's like I'm not criticizing this author for not knowing about hinge epistemology. It may not have been around when this was written. But like it is an interesting historical point that they're making something very similar. Okay, selection is informed by self-knowledge, especially of our own biases. General knowledge is also relevant, as already suggested by the above allusion to Plato's Euthyphro. We should be more open-minded in regard to controversial opinions than beliefs that are the product of simple observations. Subject matter knowledge provides further guidance. We learn and teach which claims in an area are to be taken for granted and which are at the forefront of our investigation. It is one thing to be open-minded about your belief that Homer wrote the Iliad. It is another to be open-minded about whether the Iliad was written before the 20th century. And you guys don't know, but like these sorts of examples are like listed in this book. How old is the earth? Well, it's one thing to say the earth is very, very, very old. It's another thing to say, well, it's billions of years old, or only a few 100 million years old, or only 6,000 years old. Everyone agrees the earth is very old. Now, the exact date, you can do, the scientists kind of have a consensus, but then there's religious folks that say, well, 6,000 years ago, but that's a lot. That disagreement, you have to, like, you can see why people get into the religious mindset. They just believe the Bible. Done. Okay, 6,000 years. Game over. But, like, everyone agrees that the earth is very old. And so the fact that, like, they're using a very similar example. So someone wrote something over 2,000 years ago. Well, you don't know exactly who wrote it, but you know it was written before the 20th century. There's no doubt about that. So it's like, again, there's a very parallel thing to things people say in the Hinge literature. So sorry, there's a side, but it's just the fact that I have the book right there right now. So the more honestly and reliably selective we can be, the more worthwhile is open-mindedness for interests in truth. Yeah. So if you know what's actually an interesting question, that's what you want to be open-minded about. Thus, we can capture the intuitive sense that the Pope cannot be open-minded about the existence of God without drawing the conclusion, as Gardner does, that belief and open-mindedness are incompatible. As a conceptual matter, the Pope is not compelled to resist open-mindedness about his belief that there is a God if our reconciliation succeeds. Nevertheless, the Pope can argue that the prospects of this belief being false are far less than for many other beliefs, and so it is not worthwhile to engage in activities of open-mindedness directed to that specific belief. And now the Bayesians in chat should be happy because this is moving in their direction. They're saying, look, I have full belief in this, but at the second order, the probability that this one is among the ones that are problematic is extremely low. So this is a second order Bayesian for you Bayesians in chat. That's what they're arguing for here. But then they're making space for at the object level when I say I just believe that I have a hand, like I can say that at full strength. Everything will move in the Bayesian direction over time. I disagree, but that's okay. Yeah, so this is actually pretty compatible with Bayesianism. It's just, splitting things up a little bit differently. Okay. It follows that the association of discussion... Yep, starting to lose it. Two and a half hours of streaming, and I'm only halfway through the paper. I'm in trouble. You guys are fine. It follows that the association of discussion, discovery, learning, and community of inquiry models of learning with the promotion of open-mindedness and lectures and the authority of teachers, texts, and experts as not promoting it or even antithetical to it is simplistic. The former better models a paradigm of the salient features of open-minded inquiry. I don't even know if I mean the same thing as Ivan when I say Bayesianism. Yeah. This is one of the difficulties. There's more than one way to define all of these things. And are some of them going to be equivalent? Yes. Are some of them not going to be equivalent? Yes. Some of them are going to be slightly different and substantially so. And so if you think that there's sort of a place for Bayesianism in the world, that's fine. Maybe there's different ways to split it up. This person is splitting it up in a certain way, saying there's basically second order Bayesianism, although at the first order we say we are fully certain. At the meta level, then you say, well, there's still uncertainty. How they sort of like split that, you might not like, because you basically are saying two different things about one object. You're saying, well, I fully believe that this is a hand, but then you're saying at the meta level I'm fallibilistic and there's a chance I'm wrong about that. And that seems a little bit weird, and they're making a very hard break on between the first order and the second level and the second order, or a first order like the statements and the meta level. You might not like that. I don't like that, but that's what they're doing. So they're saying when you're talking about the fact at hand, there is no doubt about what you believe. But if you're talking about the overall beliefs, you're talking like at the meta level about beliefs, then you could be wrong. Yeah. I don't love that. It seems a little bit trying to eat your cake and have it too. Okay. The former better models a paradigm of the salient features of open-minded inquiry. However, it ignores non-salient but crucial background conditions for fruitful open-mindedness, a high degree of selectivity. As we observed, a central question of open-mindedness should be when to be open-minded or self-critical. To view this question as central requires that authoritative demands pervade education and so provide a constraint on seeking autonomous judgments among students. Selectivity of content is becoming more crucial since the information on any topic that is immediately available is huge and of enormously varying quality. Consider the internet. Again, 2004. This is very prescient. So this is what's it called? This is Internet 2.0 days. This is not like current internet where it's everywhere. This is only just where you could go on the internet and find vast amounts of information. It's not like we've got the level of connectivity we have now. So this is before like social media, before like it dominating all things. Okay. Correspondingly, judgments of what to teach or to critically examine automatically exclude other candidates. In doing that, they either implicitly judge those other candidates as not as worthwhile or as arbitrarily overlooking them. Thus, in literature class, Shakespeare triumphs over Jackie Collins. Yeah, so you need to have a way of narrowing down what is worthwhile, which is why we do Philosophy Roulette Review, which we will get to review this at later on. Okay, the need for high selectivity in order for open-mindedness to be worthwhile applies to how one is open-minded and not only to what one is open-minded toward. The primary question is what source to attend to in checking on one's beliefs. For example, to check on my belief that the Volvo is a better deal than the Toyota, I check Consumer Reports rather than my neighbor. Once this question is engaged, it becomes apparent that a free marketplace of ideas is problematic as an expression of open-mindedness best fit to realize our aim as believers of increasing knowledge or understanding. Yeah, so you need expert opinions sometimes. You just can't free market this. You do need experts. In his recent book, Bernard Williams writes, quote, "We cannot take for granted that Mill's optimistic conclusion that maximal freedom of speech must assist the emergence of truth in what has come to be called a marketplace of ideas." Yeah, so at this point, it's like, really? Just having free speech is all that we need? No. Because then you get all the crazies screaming just as loud as the smart people, and that's not the greatest thing. One current difficulty he raises is in regard to the internet. And again, 2004 thinking, not current. Quote, "The internet shows signs of creating for the first time what Marshall McLuhan prophesied as a consequence of television, a global village, something that has the disadvantages both of globalization and of a village. Certainly it does offer some reliable sources of information for those who want it and know what they are looking for, but equally it supports the mainstay of all villages, gossip. It constructs proliferating meeting places for the free and unstructured exchange of messages which bear a variety of claims, fancies, and suspicions, entertaining, superstitious, scandalous, or malign. The chances that many of these messages will be true are low, and the probability that the system itself will help anyone to pick out the true ones is even lower." I mean, this is how Google made its money, by helping people find good information. But now we've moved beyond that. The search engines are kind of, we've got the enshittification of the internet and like basically the zombification where everything is, auto-generated and you can't guarantee that the data is good anymore. The search engines are basically failing. So, and they did it to themselves, which is, I guess, a little bit ironic. An obvious, if weak, response is that the part of teaching open-mindedness is to guide students to distinguish between worthy, better, and unworthy, worse sources via such criteria as the record of reliability of the sources, the constraints on the reporters to be honest, and the respect in the community accorded these sources. Yeah, and so now we need media literacy like hardcore nowadays because exactly these problems. So you come to Twitch for your news. And you go to Natty Science, and you go to Globus the Elder, because this is how we actually do shit. You talk to people and that you can talk to and hash out the ideas, and this is why you actually come on Twitch, because there's people that are smart here that actually do a good job explaining shit. and you can find out what's actually full of shit and isn't. And that's why we have this new media now, which is actually kind of ironic. Like, this did not exist. Twitch did not exist. Live streaming did not exist when this paper was written, and this is not that old. And so now we've got even more new ways of trying to decide what is actually good in the news. But it's even harder to do nowadays. Oh, man. Did I shout out Natty Science? I don't know if he's still here, but if he is, we'll give him a shout out. Natty. Let's see. No, yeah, he is. How do you like that? Thanks for the lurk, if you're still talking. But yeah, if you don't know Natty Science, go hang out with Natty Science. You can hear him talk about stuff sometimes. He's good. Yeah. Okay, where was I? Although the value of open-mindedness depends on selectivity, not all selectivity calls upon individual judgments, as the widget example attests. But there are also powerful routine devices of self-correction involving neither adopted policy nor selectivity, which cleanly reveal the value of open-mindedness and the necessity of commitment to it, at least for wide swaths of our beliefs. The most familiar of these is perception. Beliefs alter when they run counter to non-negotiable contrary observations. Perceptual mechanisms operate without our selecting our beliefs to be subject to correction. You believe that your friend Alice is in St. Louis, and then you spot her driving in Brooklyn, and so you immediately cease to believe. Yeah. Perception is naturally on as a mechanism of open-mindedness, more precisely self-correction, without setting it to on for purposes of open-mindedness, nor does it require input from us as to what to test, in contrast to its role for evaluating competing hypotheses. A more educationally familiar and pertinent mechanism of open-mindedness or self-correction is argument or discussion, or reading from or listening to varied and respected sources. In engaging in everyday discussion, one subjects a set of one's beliefs about the matter at hand to risk of serious objection or criticism by others. Since I fully believe P, I regard your opposed belief Q as wrong. Nevertheless, I can not only be tolerant of your view for political reasons, but judge it epistemically worthwhile to argue with you over the matter. For argument with others is one policy of open-mindedness I adopt to serve as a check against my anticipated mistaken beliefs, as well as anticipated mistaken judgments as to which beliefs need not be subjected to open-minded examination. As with perception, to be open-minded in these cases requires little more than to not be closed-minded, to not engage in special efforts to protect one's relevant beliefs from critical attention. Crucial to these sources or mechanisms working so well as self-correctives is that they operate to various degrees independently of oneself. In everyday discussion, I do not control either other's judgment of what beliefs of mine to criticize or how that criticism should proceed. I only weakly control the selection of topics for critical social discussion. The independence is not complete, and in appreciating this incompleteness, we converge on the importance of self-knowledge to open-mindedness raised already. To a large degree, I can control who I speak to, and this is again the selection criteria. This is hard. What streams do you go to on Twitch? Because there's a lot of crazy people on Twitch, and then there's some not so crazy, and there's some smart people here, and it's like it matters. So it's like, what do you actually subject yourself to? To what media sources I attend to, and more prominently, I control my own acceptance of their critical import, much less so for perceptual correction. Well, propaganda works. So if you keep watching shitty news, you're going to start believing the things that the shitty newscasters say. So yeah. And if anyone doesn't know what Consumer Reports is, Consumer Reports here in America is a magazine and like website that reviews many products, and they do like independent testing. They buy everything like in local stores, and then they just go test the stuff. Consumer Reports is actually in Yonkers, which is really close to me. What the essay about? Hey, what's up, Big Decus? This is about reconciling open-mindedness and belief, because generally when you believe something, you're pretty certain of it. The problem is if you say, well, I'm open-minded, I'm willing to change your beliefs. It's like, well, really, are you? If you were so certain of it, why are you so willing to change it? And so this is trying to explain how to both be an open-minded person and discuss stuff, but also, stick to your guns. How do you stick to your guns and be willing to discuss things? And this is in the sort of the education sphere. So they're trying to say, well, how do we get students to critically learn stuff, but then also maintain like a good set of beliefs? So that's what's going on. Welcome in. If anyone who doesn't know me, hi, I'm Noah, Noger, Nogre, Nogreo, whatever. Just don't be a jerk about it. And I read philosophy on Twitch, and then we review at the end. So if you're here at the end, you get to give your review. And that will go up on a website rather soon. I'm working on the website right now. Okay, so whenever one declines to accept the findings of independent sources, for example, Consumer Reports, that's not just independent, that's independent expert sources. One implicitly judges in one's own favor, which, if recognized, raises doubts and self-doubts as to one's retaining proper authority to enter the assessment. Yeah, like if you're denying the experts, why do you think you're right about that? Why do you think you have grounds to deny someone who's independent and expert in this? In judging that one's position on the Middle East is surely correct, one thereby implicitly judges that one is not influenced or biased by one's own position to exempt it from criticism or to drawing upon a skewed sample of commentary. Yeah, this is just hilarious because this is a 2004 paper that it's just hitting all the points. Now, granted, my friend Lisa suggested this paper to me, so maybe she knew it would be funny. That it was talking about the Middle East again and other things about the internet that the person writing this in 2004 could not have known. Okay, it is the kind of dual judgment one must make in putative cases of conflict of interest. A judge, in deciding whether to recuse him or herself from a case because of a potential conflict of interest, must simultaneously decide that he can evaluate the case impartially and that the very judgment is made impartially. That is, he is in a position to make the judgment about himself impartially when he is the one deciding. The judge must be able to stand back from his own involvement and, from that point of view, determine that he is in a position to decide impartially. This is an especially hard thing to do, since he must see himself as entering a judgment that he recognizes as placing his position to judge in doubt. My dad's best friend from childhood is an immigration judge, and so he would decide on people trying to get into the United States of America. And this lady had a sworn deposition, so she sat down, swore up and down that she was telling the truth as legally required, and put down her story and entered it into the record. And then later she was in front of the judge, in front of him, and gave a completely different story. And he's like, "Look, lady, you're asking me to decide like this. Oh, well, what happened? Are you lying then or are you lying now? What's the true story?" And he said, she looked him right in the eye and says, "That's your problem, not mine." And he was like, "Fair enough." He was like, how am I supposed to, completely different stories, but he still had to render a decision on the lady's immigration status, not if she was a liar. She was obviously lying, but he had to figure it out. It's yeah. So judges get themselves in these weird problems. Okay, the disposition to open-mindedness that depends upon our capacity to view our own beliefs as if an observer without withdrawing our authority over our own beliefs. We treat a belief of our own as just something someone believes, and so, of course, it might be mistaken. Within this perspective on oneself, one appreciates that the faults or failures that one ascribes to some others are likely to hold of oneself, even though the ascriber does not so detect them. One does not exempt oneself from the weaknesses one finds in others. Yeah, so I guess when you have to recuse yourself, you have to say, would someone in this position be, even if it wasn't me, would they be biased? And then you have to say, well, how would that person, even though it happens to be me, am I biased? And it's yeah, that makes it a little bit hard. Okay, to teach for open-mindedness is to get students to appreciate the objective view of oneself, including our inherent resistance to it. The teaching should develop out of students' own reflective exercises, otherwise it will misleadingly appear as an alien intellectualist exercise. Is it really hard to realize your beliefs might be mistaken? Let me draw upon a comment of Ivan Neo's once. When he first heard of Bayesianism, and you can ask him about this, he's told it many times or a few times on stream, he did not believe Bayesianism. He thought it was wrong. He was like, this can't be right. Then something 3 days later, he was like, no, this is correct. And so it took Ivan a few days to realize he was wrong about how he used to think, and then he decided he was right later. And so, yes, it can be really fucking hard. And, yeah, Frank, I think I'm more on the side of this paper. You have to realize people come from very different backgrounds. And so people say you're in like you come from basically a cult. You grew up in a cult background with like crazy religious people, and then you get out of the cult, and then you have to realize what you were taught for your entire life for a very long time was completely wrong. This is not an easy thing to do. Like, you have to realize, just because people don't want to think they're wrong. And so I think a lot of people, I think this does happen. Especially about fundamental things. A guy I knew when I was in high school, he was older than me. He went into the military. And he died in a military accident. Through no fault of his own. It wasn't his fault. Some fighter jet flew too low and clipped a wire. He was on like a gondola in Italy, and the gondola he was on got clipped by a fighter jet, and he died. They plunged to his death. And my mom was talking to his mom later, and she basically said she lost her faith over this accident. And it's like, okay, she had a adult son, either in his 20s or 30s, probably 20s, that died. So she had to be at least middle-aged, I think, at this point, because he was older than me. So the mother had to be older, and everybody was a little bit older. And it's like, you lost your faith over this. So it's like, she never doubted before that in her faith, and then like this sort of ruined it for her. She lost her faith. So it's like, yeah, people have these long-running beliefs that they really don't think they could overturn. I know this isn't everybody. I know people don't there's people that are just like, I'm open to stuff. But that's not everybody, and I think a lot of people, like, I'm not meaning like a small percentage. I mean a large percentage think they have a good beat on the world, or at least they understand some things. No, I get that, Frank. Awful things happen like that all the time to all sorts of people, yeah. But you don't always think it's going to happen to you. And it's not always because you believe it, you just don't think about it. You just assume you're okay. That it took a thing happening to her means something was wrong. Well, I mean, you could say something was wrong with her epistemology. As far as I knew, she had a, pretty decent life. Like, you can believe many wrong things. It's like, many, many, many years ago, people thought the Earth was the center of the universe. It would be very hard. It took a long time for people to believe otherwise. It's like, yeah. And so that took a lot of effort. And I'm not even going with the Earth is flat. People really didn't believe the Earth was flat, or at least many people did not. People thought we were living in a sphere. But that the Earth was not the center of the universe took a long time to change. And so it's like, well, was something wrong with people? It's like, not really, because there's a lot of evidence that says the Earth is not moving, because it looks like everything else is moving, like the sun and the stars look like they're moving from our perspective. The idea that like there's relative motion and we don't feel the motion of the Earth, that took a lot of effort. And so, was something wrong with people? I don't think anything was wrong with people that we thought the Earth was the center of the universe, because it took a long time and a lot of evidence before we realized we are not the center of the universe. And so, like, that was hard. So I don't think I don't think it's that hard to think that we are going to have very fixed beliefs, that there's no reason to change. Like, the idea that, like, we can say, all right, the Earth goes around the sun's going around, like, the center of our, like, universe or whatever, galaxy. It's like, that's hard. That took a lot of physics. A lot of science, a lot of physics, a lot of sort of math. That took millennia. So, to think that we have some ideas now that we are very certain of that won't change in the next 2,000 years, yeah, dude. Like, I'm sure something in our logic is going to change in 2,000 years. It took 2,000 years to really change significantly. Like, that's not entirely true, but like there was a major change in the in logic in like the late 1800s with Frege, and it's changed rapidly in the last 100 years. But the idea that it won't change again in the next 2,000 years, like, it's going to happen. We're going to find something more about logic, and it's going to be radically different. Things we didn't think would change about logic now will change. It just will. You think you phrased the first thing ambiguously. I didn't mean to ask if it's hard to change a specific belief. I mean to have the overall idea that many of my beliefs will have mistakes in them. Of course, many things I believe are wrong. Yeah. But, like, so it's not... But you just don't think some of the really certain ones are. Yeah. still considered to be center of the beginning of life. Yeah, that's fair. And we don't know any different right now, hydrocannabinoids. So that's a fair assessment. We don't know. And so it's like people still think like, well, we only have life here as far as we know. So it's like beginning of life was here as far as we know. It's like, yeah. Now, I have no problem with being that changing. That doesn't seem like that's a crazy thought that like other life could have happened other places. And I mean, that's a discussed thing in the literature. We just don't know about it yet. But it's going to be very hard. Like, you know, some people think like, you know, there's true and there's false and you can't have overlap. And there's people that disagree with that. It's like they're dialetists and like they have logics now where you can have things that are both true and false or things that are neither true and false. And it's like, you know, things you think are very certain, like there's true and there's false. There's ways around it. There are, but you may not have considered them. So yeah, you may think those theories are crazy, but like whatever. There are people that, you know, believe other than you do. All right. You know, yeah. Like, people really, and this is the other part, and maybe it could have been made stronger. To actually criticize something else, you have to hold certain things steady. Like I said, like saying before, you can't have everything be open for discussion. You need some position to argue from, to argue anything else is right or wrong. You can't doubt everything. It doesn't work. And so the way that you can shift things around also gets very touchy. You have to have like, some people think, look, I have to have like a logic or something that I can use to rationally discuss stuff. Well, then what is your logic? You have to hold that kind of fixed to even discuss this. And then you get into real hard questions about, well, what counts as a logical thing? What makes up logic, and that can't be revised. And that gets you into a whole epistemology of logic that is very difficult. So it's like, if you want to push it, like I know areas of philosophy where people argue this stuff, but like what are you actually arguing if you have no other logic to discuss? And then you have to define different ways of talking about language, and it gets massively complicated. So yeah. Okay, but continuing, yeah, and feel free to ask more questions. If you got questions about what I said, let me know. Okay. Consider, though, an ordinary case. Tommy gets very angry at Julie for teasing him at lunchtime. Afterwards, Tommy thinks that he responded more harshly than usual. He is thus stimulated to recall that in an earlier class that day, he received a B on a paper, though he thought he deserved an A. In taking the latter datum as helping him to understand and evaluate better the appropriateness of his anger, Tommy is stepping back from himself and using a piece of evidence that an observer of him will use. So here's a natural exercise for teachers to build upon. Teaching for open-mindedness involves lessons about improved self-understanding, even if no specific teaching is directed to self-understanding. Once one takes that objective view, one recognizes reasons to provide checks on one's judgment, even when, and sometimes especially when, one finds no internal reasons for such checks. Now, I agree. Now, this is the sort of thing people do not do. They do not doubt their own beliefs. They just sort of be like, I have no reason to doubt myself. And they do not internally check. This happens all the time. Author says, the fanatic is someone who refuses to step back from his own judgments and to allow his beliefs to be subject to independent checks and controls. Yeah. And this, you get this fanatics, you get people like religious fanatics, zealots, basically. When someone becomes a zealot, they believe something and they run with it and they don't think about any of the possible ways things could go wrong. Happens all the time. And it happens in philosophy, it happens in other areas. You don't need to be a religious zealot. You can be a zealot about basically your baseball team. What's up, Retheus? How you doing? Easy to believe you're the center of everything if you don't consider things. Default state. Yep, exactly. It takes a little bit of work and reflection to do this. And maturity. You get kids, or narcissists. You don't even need to be a kid. That do not know or understand that, the world is more complicated than them. So most maps are centered on your perspective. Exactly. People are looking at the world from their point of view, and they don't even understand that that isn't the only way to do it, and they refuse to look at it this way. So it's yeah. So people are always feeling they're attacked are like this. Not everything is attacking you because not everything's about you, but people don't recognize this. They think everything's about them. So you see this in politicians quite often. Okay, how you been, Retheus? Hope you're doing well. The imposition of such checks recalls, again, the parallel with the company producing the widgets. The post-process monitor provides a check on the manufacturing process that, in yielding a widget at the end of the assembly line, implicitly claims that no checks are needed. You're doing great, dude. How am I? I'm okay. I mean, I feel like a little, a little discombobulated this week. I'm not entirely sure why, but, I've been getting stuff done, so that's good. Discombobulated, but okay. So, this duality lesson for teaching and curriculum is easily lost. Stanley Fish, in discussing the implications of his view of literary interpretation for teaching practice, writes, quote, "Not only does one believe what one believes, but one teaches what one believes. And since you will always believe in something, there will always be something to teach, and you will teach that something with all the confidence and enthusiasm that attends belief, even if you know, as I do, that the belief which gives you that something and gives it to you so firmly may change. Until they do, however, we will argue from their perspective and for their perspective, telling our students and readers what it is that we certainly see and trying to alter their perceptions so that in time they will come to see it too." Some weeks are like that. To get it, yeah. I mean, nothing's like wrong, but it's just like things just feel a little bit odd. Who knows? Okay. Yeah, so again, you have to argue from somewhere, and people are going to argue from wherever they are. Like, wherever they start out, that's what they're going to argue from, because that's just how we are. We need a perspective to argue from. Like, that's it. Like, you can't just argue from nowhere. Fish's observation starts off from the correct thought that belief guides an action, and that to believe is to claim the truth of what is believed. However, he ignores the importance of second-order belief about one's first-order beliefs. Once the second-order point of view is brought forth as a potential corrective of our first-order judgments, we have reason to draw back from Fish's conclusion. We have independent reason for so drawing back, since his recommendation is anathema to liberal education, one aspect of which is deep respect for great traditions of texts and ideas. And yeah, for those coming in, the idea is that you can fully believe what you believe, but then you also have to have like a belief about all the beliefs, like not just any one of them, but about all of them, that you might be mistaken about something. So it's like there's a second order belief. I don't know if I buy this hard break between the things that you believe and then the belief about beliefs, that you could be wrong about some of them, but that's what the author is pushing here. So the idea is that you can be open-minded at the second level, at the meta level, but at any given belief, you can, go full on and like say, this is what I believe 100%. Okay. We show such respect by not teaching in perfect accord with our contemporary taste, even when, as is usual, we share that taste. There is much that any of us will teach that we do not directly believe, unless we lack humility, and the institution within which we teach exercises no controls on our hubris. Imagine that you are a middle school history teacher who believes strongly in the use of textbooks rather than original texts, because in younger grades, the reading of original texts would be very difficult and coverage would be too greatly sacrificed. So you use textbooks. However, you are also likely to use some original texts by your own choice rather than by institutional mandate. You will do so because others whom you respect value it and because of your professional regard for the traditions of historical study. Standing back from your own judgment, you realize that it is kind of this judgment that is more likely to alter subsequently as faddish. And imposing a check on your own curriculum decisions, you do not yet concede any reason to renounce your view. Contrary to the tenor of Fish's remarks, recognizing which beliefs may change can alter our teaching, even if the alteration does not yet require surrendering those beliefs. Yeah, so you may be like, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway, even though I have no reason to doubt it. Like, there could be a problem here, but we're not worrying about that now. Okay. Open-mindedness depends upon and leads to an appreciation of the value of a dual view of one's own beliefs, internal and objective, even if the dual view generates a tension that threatens continued believing. The tension is an expression of the value of open-mindedness, and that value would be undermined if one tried to resolve the tension by surrendering or weakening the belief. The belief The belief open-mindedness tension is one facet of the traditional tension between education for autonomy and the necessity of deferring in education to authority and tradition. My emphasis has largely been on autonomy only because the focus is defending open-mindedness. You agree 100% with this? Yeah. This is also from 2004. So it's like, but what they're doing here is kind of interesting. They want to leave space to say you can 100% believe what you want, but then you have to have a meta level belief. And some people in chat are like, well, that's kind of silly. Why don't you just have like the 99.999% belief in something? But yeah, you had a math major friend come into town. He was all about determinism, by the way. It happens. It happens. A lot of people are very deterministic nowadays. I am not one of them, but a lot of people are. You didn't get into it proper, but it made you laugh a bit. Sounds good. It sounds like a fun friend, Have something to argue about. Yeah. I mean, my position has been that, like, when you're doing science, it's deterministic. When you're not doing science, who knows? But, like, that's kind of my position. Like, part of the world can look deterministic. But I leave a lot of space open. Okay. Even if it is granted that open-mindedness is strictly compatible with traditional religious and cultural beliefs, it is actually taught and promoted. As it is actually taught and promoted, it may undermine them. Yeah, so you don't want to be like undermining all of people's beliefs because that will fuck them up. For many of those beliefs will depend upon according authority to texts and to individuals due to their place in these traditions rather than for their expertise. We are positioned to dodge this issue. If students come to understand the nature and value of open-mindedness and become adept at its workings, the task is complete. Whether the student applies them in personally sensitive areas is a decision that is not that of educational institution. Of course, some of the teaching of open-mindedness will touch on sensitive areas, but this is a general curriculum difficulty not specific to promoting open-mindedness. Think of decisions in regards to evolution and creationism in biology courses. The educational task is fulfilled if it equips students to appreciate and evaluate the costs and benefits of applying or not the learning to sensitive and personal areas. He was the no free will argument. Yeah. Well, that's the hard determinist for you. No free will. So, yeah. I mean, Prof was in chat earlier, and I agree with Prof on many things, but he's a hard no free will determinist, and I disagree with him on that. And it's like, okay, like he was in here earlier, and he'll tell you he's a hard no free will determinist. So it's like, yeah, I know we've got a few of them. Like I think Ivan Neal, I don't know how far like hard determinism he goes, but I think he's a compatibilist. So he thinks what we have a free will is compatible with physics. So it's like it's a determinism, but then we also have a will within that, but it's a determined one. I think he says we have all the will we want. All right. However, I do not want to completely dodge the issue. Viewing open-mindedness as an educational goal subservient to truth or knowledge, rather than an independent objective as of intrinsic educational value, helps here in two ways. First, it limits the scope of the promotion of open-mindedness. Were it a freestanding objective, a forceful argument arises to teach for open-mindedness in areas of greatest sensitivity where resistance to open-mindedness is high. On the position defended here, however, open-mindedness does not demand teaching outside the standard curriculum. There is no demand that teachers press students on matters of personal belief, except insofar as those are implicated in subject matter content, which is independently justified for inclusion in the curriculum. Okay, so they're really arguing for like in-curriculum open-mindedness, not global. And they were saying this earlier. You don't want to have global open-mindedness. There's reasons not to do that. Second, teaching for open-mindedness can be candidly justified to parents and others as consonant with the basic mission of education, which is to teach important truths and to advance knowledge and understanding in various subjects. Truth and knowledge are very ordinary and pervasive aims of education, constituting the most basic criteria for sorting texts, topics, and resources into what can be included in the curriculum and what is to be excluded except for historical or similarly indirect purposes, for example, teaching astrology within the history of science, not as a science. To realize this basic mission involves teaching methods of inquiry that are our best means for judging truth and falsity. The teaching of open-mindedness, as we have noted, is a part of this basic mission. There's no special justification for it is required. Once you accept the basic educational criterion and mission of furthering knowledge, you are committed to the teaching of open-mindedness. Consequently, to revert to a problem noted at the beginning, teaching for open-mindedness is not to introduce the teaching or promotion of new subjects or values. Okay, just over 3-hour streaming mark, but I got through the paper. So now what we do is we rate. We rate the paper. So here's what happens. Everyone in chat now gets to use the emotes, and as you can see, here's a description of them. If you thought this paper was fun, had fun ideas, you say brain dance because it gives you some fun ideas. Man, I'm sweaty. Nog grapes. If it has big grains that shrivel up, then you write nog grapes, and that means it didn't quite justify the claims that it made in the beginning, or not justified by the end. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. If you didn't think this was, Maddie gives it an F-. Well, that would be a vote nay, and you can also double up on the emotes. So if you think it was great, you could vote yay, and then you could vote yay multiple times. You could also vote nay multiple times, and if you think it's meh, you can vote meh also. Nog Oro for Ouroboros, deep ancient ideas. And what's up, Maddie? How you doing? No, you just got in. I don't know what this paper is. Okay, you're just fucking around. Yeah, this is talking about open-mindedness and belief, and there's a tension there because most people, they have beliefs that they hold very, very strongly. But then if you also want to have open-mindedness, well, then does that undermine your very strongly held beliefs? Okay, then there's Nog Turd. Was this all style, no substance, still poop underneath? And Nog Knife, slicing and dicing arguments, for it was a complicated argument, but it was cool. Then you might do a slice and dice. How you been, Maddie, anyway? Hope everything is going well with you. So let's see, what do we think about this? I mean, this is okay, this paper. I don't quite love what it did. It said, look, you can have your beliefs as much as you want, but the only time you have to doubt them is at the meta level. It's sort of like the what was I calling it? It's a lottery paradox. Even though you think none of the tickets are going to win, you still know one of them is going to win. And so it's well, you still think all your beliefs are true, but you still think there might be some problems somewhere. It's well, that's a little bit not great. Maddie says, no, because you can always take in information at first, make strong opinions, then maybe even evaluate them later with new information. Yeah. Well, the author had an argument against that. They also said, and this was kind of interesting, most people don't want to do that. When you have a debate, you want to encourage the strongest debate possible. And if you start taking in new stuff and just don't defend your position, you're kind of being wishy-washy. And the author says you don't want to also just encourage wishy-washiness. You want people to have strong opinions. You want them to be able to defend their opinions. And how do you say, okay, you can defend vigorously without just and then still allow for debate? Yeah. I mean, I think, Maddie, you and many of the other people in chat were kind of well, I don't believe anything 100%. I just kind of, I reevaluate given the information. The author took the position here. Basically, they said, no, people believe stuff 100%, but they still have to be fallibilists. They still have to say, I get things wrong sometimes. So how do you do that? And they tried to, thread the needle there. Yeah. So, I mean, what do we think? The other thing is that I have a pretty solid education in certain things. Well, that's what I'm saying, too. My position is I'm not changing my mind for fucking nobody on certain topics. The idea that I'm going to be I'm wrong about this is no. You have no idea how much time and effort I've spent on some of these things. And so if someone disagrees with me, I don't give a fuck. You have to bring, massive argumentation before I even, I'm going to even look your way on certain topics. So it's yeah. I'm not even I've had pretty solid argumentation, and then I've gone over this stuff a fucking million times. It's you'd have to bring something radically new before I'm going to change my mind on certain topics. So yeah. Exactly. I don't give a shit about what randos on the internet say. It's okay, if you're a rando on the internet and you disagree with me, that's fine. Just don't I don't care. But if you want me to actually like have a debate, you better bring the fire, because otherwise it's like it's not gonna impress me. It's like no. All right, so what do I think? Let's see. It's not a bad paper. I think it's got some problems. Like I don't love the basically saying there's you can have all your beliefs at 100% and then at the meta level you disagree, because that seems like a very strong disconnect between your everyday beliefs and then what you're saying about your everyday beliefs. It just seems basically a little bit contradictory, and maybe this person is okay with that, you know? Maybe it's perfectly acceptable to have, even though you say I have nothing that's like wrong with my beliefs, but then I could be wrong with them. It's like there's no individual belief that's wrong, but then like I have a meta belief that some of them are wrong. That's kind of weird. It does still seem contradictory. They call it attention. Now, I don't know. So what happened in this paper? I'm going to give this, let's see. I'm going to give this a knife, actually. They started off with, some decent argumentation. They made their case like this is not a poorly structured paper. Like they argued basically that most people argue from a position when you believe something, you treat it like you 100% believe it. Like chat notwithstanding. Like I know chat here is like, well, no, I believe it 98.5. Most people aren't like that. So their argument, I think they did a good job, but then they also kind of, I don't love this argument. Like I said, I think the argument is just kind of, and they're getting a nog turd too, because their argument that they both, you can say something, your meta belief and your object level beliefs, like the belief about the beliefs, that those don't connect. I mean, I find that just a little bit disingenuous. It's like you're leaning really hard into the meta level. And it's like, well, when we're talking in real life, there is no obvious meta level in like everyday language. So like the fact that you're saying this, technically that's okay, but I don't think that's great. So it's like, yeah. I'm going to give him a vote yay also. It's not bad. It's like they did a good job. So I'd recommend this paper if you want to read it, but it's got some little bit of it's still got some problems. So I mean, maybe I'll double up on one of these things. I'll think about it. But what does chat think? And everyone in chat is now welcome to do it. I know this was a long paper and I've been streaming a long time, so everyone's sleeping at this point, but that's okay. So yeah, that's why I don't do 3-hour streams. Lose people over the way. Which is okay. Yep, exactly, Maddie. Yeah, I mean, not a bad paper. My friend recommended this. It's okay. It's like, what was this? I think this person died, actually. Let's see if I can find out. See if we can find out what this was. Yep, in memoriam, died in 2012. Yeah. Alright, yeah, died in 2012. Too bad. Oh well. Rest today. Well, you gave it the full one. Okay. So that's fine too. But not a very specific rating, but cool. Thank you for rating. Appreciate it. So you gave it the Ouroboros, the knife, the scream, the navel gazing, and the yay and the nay. That's fair. Now the yay and the nay, if you do that, they'll basically cancel out to make a meh. So that's just how it goes. So you gave it a meh, really. And then also, like, the other ones will interact too, which is kind of interesting in how I rank stuff. But yeah. But thank you for rating. I appreciate it. And then you'll go up on the rating site. All right, so I will give everyone else 60 more seconds. 60 more seconds, get your rating in.